Hey guys, how you doing? So first and foremost, I want to really thank you all for getting on in this drop. It means a lot to me. It's the first production knife that I have my name on. I've done the mid tags and I've done the collaborations with Elliot, Firm Forge, but it's the first production knife that I know it's still not cheap, but it's significantly more affordable. So I like to call it affordable knife, and it's really high quality. I've been carrying mine since I got the prototypes and I really like it. I think a lot of people will be, I really hope and think that most of you guys will be satisfied. I can't see why people would not like it, if I can say so myself. So I have the list of the questions that people from Massdrop provided me for the Q&A, and I'll try to go down the list. I'll try to answer all of them, and we'll see. Hopefully you can take the rambling. So the first section is about the treasure. How do you approach a knife like this? Overall feel, aesthetics, or combination of both? So for me, it always has to be function first. That being said, it's a pocket knife. So if I want a knife that's really meant to, be a workhorse, it's supposed to be a fixed blade. Just the plain fact of the folding knife having the two pieces and having a gap there, if you ever really work with the knife, that alone, no matter how comfortable the knife is, it's gonna be not comfortable. So pocket knife, I don't really consider pocket knives hard heavy use. They just not by the design, by default, they not. But it still have to work as a pocket knife. It's meant to cut things. One thing is what you will notice on a lot of my knives, I always have a very pronounced regular, finger choil up front, just for lock the index finger in there. It's comfortable and it's secure. The knife will not slip. That's why you're not gonna see me use jimpings and any other things like that, because just the nature of the handle makes the knife secure. So you're gonna see the big index finger choil up front, and usually my knives will have slight cant downward. It's just what I like. There are few models that are kind of straight. I'm not a big fan of a straight knives that it feels boring to me. There's a lot of knives. Most of the knives out there are just straight, and it just doesn't do it for me. So most of the knives, my knives, you're gonna see some cant. Either overall hump like that, or like in the treasure instance, you're gonna have downward cant on the handle and then upswept on the blade. I really like the flow of the knife. So the handles will be very similar in a lot of my knives. Why? Because from way back when I did a lot of fixed blades for real serious use, that's what I found that it works. That's what I found it's comfortable for me and for most of my customers. I never had people complaining. So I stuck with what works, what I know it works, what I know it's comfortable. The treasure itself was kind of going back to roots. I've done a lot of, I don't like tanto knives, but I did a lot of tantos just because they are interesting, they're cool looking. I've done a lot of, I call it modified Warney, my Mako blade, when you have almost like a tanto, but that break point is in the middle. And if you would look on a lot of my original designs, a lot of my original fixed blades, they all had that just continuous upswept belly. So you didn't have a straight and the belly up front. A lot of my knives had just continuous curved belly because it's really functional, really versatile blade shape. And I combined it with that Bowie shape, Bowie clip point over two swoops just to make it interesting and to go along with the scoops down here. So overall, the aesthetics, I think, they just complement each other. The top of the handle, it just worked for me when I was sketching it. It was just interesting design, interesting look, and it's comfortable. It provides that kind of break. Like when you hold something in your hand, there is if you would look at your hand, there is almost like a break. So it actually kind of works that way in the hand. That what would look like unnatural shape, it actually is kind of natural in the hand. So it is definitely a combination of both aesthetics and the feel and the look. Also, another thing on my knives, I want the knife to look, nice in both open and closed position. I don't want to have things sticking out pretty much anywhere, or big gap somewhere when it's closed. How do you get such amazing colors on your anodizing? Thank you. I I've done a lot of anodizing. I've made a lot of knives and I play around and experiment a lot. There's no real secrets or science about it. I have videos on YouTube showing what I do, how I do, and it really is there are a lot of things that will have effect on the outcome of the colors. The prep work, the finishes you're gonna start off with, and then what are you using. So the color's gonna look different if you're just gonna analyze a satin finish, when you're gonna analyze stonewash finish, when you're gonna analyze sandblast finish, bead blast, if you're gonna use acid etching, if you're gonna use the acid I use, the wink, rosin stain removal, or if you're gonna use the multi-etch that a lot of knife makers use. I'm not a big fan because multi-etch kind of requires, you know, for it to work effectively, it has to be like warmed up, it's expensive. I really like the simple rust and stain removal from wink. I have a YouTube videos on that if you're interested. And then the combination of the finishes I do. So like when I do the little carving on the edges or even on the front scale, it lets you to really combine two colors to make it pop, to make it interesting, almost like the holographic look on them. But the main thing is experimenting. You know, I have a lot of fun with trying new things, just like with Damascus. It just, you know, get the material and experiment with it and find what you like, find what the customers like. Which lubricant do you recommend for the pivot, and what are the other tips or maintenance for this knife you can give? For this specific knife, I highly recommend be ready that we Loctites everything, which I think it's a good thing, but if you are one of the people that like to take things apart, be ready for it. So if you want to take it apart, you have to be really careful, or you want to warm up the screws with like a heat gun or a hair dryer to loosen up the Loctite. I think it's good because there really isn't a need to take the knife apart for cleaning. You know, you can blow it out, wash it out. There is, unless something really major happened, there is really no need to take the knife apart. I use my knife, I go to beaches, I never take apart my knives that I carry and never have problems. But you know, everybody's different, but I recommend having high quality Torx bits. And as for a lubricant, I'd never make a big deal out of lubricants. There's so many, they all do the same thing, so I really don't think there is any difference in, you know, any lubricant will do the job. I never really even oil the pivots, I just put the dab of oil on the detent. That's all I ever do on the knives. Because if you think about when it comes to the bearings, when you put lubricant on the bearing, you are actually asking for the dust and debris to get stuck in there, because lubricant is almost like a glue, so to say. You know, if something goes there like a dust, it will just stay there because it gets you know, the lubricant will kind of hold it in place instead of just passing through. Makes it harder to wash out. All of the finishes and handle designs for the Thrasher, which one would you choose yourself? I actually did place an order myself. I bought, you know, pre-order one myself, so I just get one of the random ones from the, you know, from the assembly line or whatever, from the shipping department. And I went for the, I think it's pelagic, the one with the, a lot of people call it bamboo finish, and I kind of like it, but I think it's called pelagic, and in the sand color, which is stonewash. I just like stonewash, even though I rarely use it on my knives because I feel like titanium needs to be anodized. But I just love this color combination. When it's all gray, it's just very clean finish. So I ordered myself pelagic, not sand, pelagic common, I think this one is called. Or is it sand? No. Sand. Well, this one, the stonewash. I have a brain fire right now. Why choose S35VN as opposed to RVL34 M390 CPN20CV? I didn't choose the steel, it was kind of just decided by Massdrop. I'm not picky steel guy. Only thing what I will say, I personally, and you can see it on my custom knives, I do not like high carbide steels. So like for example 20CV, I'm actually not a fan. We use it with Elliot. Elliot loves that steel. I'm not a big fan. I like simple steels with low carbide, so ABL. That's why I use ABL for a long time in my knives. And right now I'm using Nitro V because I feel like it's essentially the same like ABL, but better rust resistance and slightly higher hardness, which I like. So I'm getting my nitro V at 62, 63. RVL 34 is old. That's like an old version of 154 cm. M390 is essentially the same as 20 CV. So they're all decent steels. And to be honest, in my opinion, most of the people, vast majority of people, if they would have a pocket knife in any of these decent steels, so you know, the high carbide steel, they are kind of giveaway when it comes to sharpening. You will see, people can recognize it, but most of the steel like S30, S35, 154, CPN 154, RVL 34, if you had a knife, pocket knife with any of these, you know, at this point I would call that's some mid-range steels, because they are not some, you know, super steels. There's like regular good steels. Nobody would ever know the difference really. If you didn't stamp it or laser etch it on the blade, most people would not know what steel it is. That's just reality. I know it sounds weird, but they are good steels, and when they are made and heat treated and then, you know, processed properly, it's just gonna work well. So, you know, it's not like by switching a steel, the knife suddenly is gonna be noticeably worse, or, you know, noticeably better rust resistance or edge holding and all that stuff. It's just not. That's reality, at least in my opinion. Remember, this is all opinion. We all have them. Do the scales have material cut out on the inside to save weight? Not in this. I never consider it, because my designs, the knives, the thicknesses and size and everything I use on my knives, they make the knives, you know, not overly heavy. You know, all my knives are between 4 and 5 ounces, so I don't feel like they need it. But that being said, I always was a fan of it, so I might consider asking for it in some future production stuff, because I mean, yeah, the lighter the better. I carry a lot of stuff on my person all the time, so even though I never think of it because the knife isn't overly heavy, hey, it's probably a good idea to consider in the future. So I'll probably think about it now if we will have these, you know, options to do stuff like that, because I sure as hell can't do that time efficiently on my knives. I definitely consider it. So that's all the questions about the Thrasher. So part 2 is about Michal. That's me, Mike. Michal is like Michael but without the E. Feels weird talking about myself, because I've done so many videos on YouTube over the years, but it's been so long, so it's always weird, because I'm still just nobody in the garage, so it's weird. How did you start making knives? Goes back to the YouTube. It all started on YouTube. I started making videos just, you know, just like showing my collection, and it started with the cheap Chinese crappy knives. I just kind of like knives since I started working, actually making some money that I could buy myself some toys. It all starts like that. Like all addiction, it starts small. So I started collecting and then like slightly modifying my stuff, and making fixed blade sheets, Kydex sheets for the fixed blades, because a lot of the cheaper fixed blades came with the crappy stuff, and Kydex was actually easy enough. And people liked it, and they kept asking me for sheets, so I've been doing those. And over time, it went from the sheets to like cutting out all cheap machetes to tiny little kiridashi pieces and reshaping knives, and then it went to like actually making my custom knives, you know, buying a steel and making full-on custom knives. And then when it went into folders over the years. It's funny because it feels like it was yesterday, but it's been a couple of years now. It's 5 years now since I've been doing pretty much purely folders since we're here in Florida, and it's another probably 4 years in Brooklyn before that. So man, it's probably 9 years since I've been making knives. Man, time flies. Time flies quick. Especially with the kids now. What was the knife that first sparked your interest in the hobby? I gotta say that the first like a more expensive, like, you know, quote unquote fancier knives that got my attention about, you know, the slightly better knives, you know, kind of like step from those cheap Chinese things. Besides, you know, I had the Spyderco, like probably the first knife I ever got was a Native and a Leatherman, but that was just purely tools. I bought the knife because it has a knife screwdriver, and you know, I was cutting a lot of things back, you know, in my job. But the first knife that was really like, I want this knife because I want it, because it looks awesome, was a top stump brown tracker. And a lot of people hate that knife, a lot of people love it. It's an interesting design, it's a cool knife. I do think the Tops version is poorly executed because of the grinds, but I still think the design itself is interesting design, and it's a tool. If you know how to use your tool, hey, it will get the job done. When did you know you wanted to make knives full time? I was busting my chops on two jobs, my regular full-time jobs back in Brooklyn, and I was making at the time pretty nice amount of knives already. You know, I was, considering I had the regular Monday to Friday 8 hours a day a job, I was making probably 5-6 fixed blades a week. So I was hustling. I came home, I started working, I work all weekends. I was hustling to get the tools to, you know, to start it up. And when the time came when we wanted to move down to Florida, one of the reasons was that I felt like at that point I kind of established myself in the knife world with the customers and everything, to the point where I thought that I can give it a try. I can give it a try. I can try if I can, you know, if I can make it full time. And worst comes to worst, I can always fall back to, I was pretty decent at my regular full-time job, which was low voltage electronics, you know, alarms, cameras, and TVs, home theaters, all that stuff. So I always had that kind of like a backup, that I could always, you know, find myself a job, and I was never afraid to do anything. You know, I've done all kinds of jobs, constructions, tree removal, I've done a lot. So, you know, I always believe that if you want to get the job, you can always get a job, if you're not scared. What are some of your favorite knife makers? I think the number one for me, it's Anso. I always been a fan of his designs, always functional but aesthetically very different than anything else. He was a big inspiration. I really admire his work, and there's a lot of knife makers that I admire. You know, GTC is amazing. There's a lot of knife makers that I just respect tremendously, even though I'm not crazy about their designs, but they're awesome as people. Their knives are good. They just, you know, knives doesn't do it for me, but I still have tremendous respect for the makers. So that's also important to know that I can look up to a maker even if I don't really like his designs, because designs are, it's just opinion. We all like different things, but the work they put into it, the originality, the complexity of some of them, there is a lot of them. But if I have to say just one name, it would probably Anso, because his designs, his knives go way back. He was just really like him. Plus, he's a really nice guy, along with Jasper Vox. What are your interests outside of knife making? Guns. I'm a big gun guy. I love gun shooting, guns. Family is the number one, definitely. Family is even before knives. I love being a father. It's the hardest thing we ever did, you know, to become parents, but it's the best thing you ever do. So essentially that is the number one job, being a parent. I try to be as best as I can, and it's rewarding. It's definitely rewarding. We love outdoors. Even my little boy, he loves outdoors already. He loves animals. I had too many hobbies, but it just, you know, family, knives, guns, outdoors. It's probably that order is the main thing. What is your design process? The truth is that most of my designs came from me just tweaking out design, regrinding, reshaping something I already had at hand. Because it's always easy, you know, so let's say I have this knife, and it's always easier for me to, because I can't sketch, guys, to be honest. I draw stick people, you know, so I can't draw. You know, how you see sometimes the artists, the knife makers, that they draw these beautiful pictures. Not me. Not me. So very often I take a knife and I have this vision in my head that I can change this design and have it completely different knife that nobody would even ever recognize. And if I like it after I'm done, then I will go back to like a draft site and I will actually, you know, design that knife on its own, so I don't have to do all that grinding off and reshaping. But a lot of designs are born that way. Or let's say, so I have an idea that I really like this handle, but I want to try a different blade shape, and that blade shape cannot be reground from this one. I will go there and I will design that blade shape there, and I'll try if it works. So it's a lot of time it's that, because goes kind of back to that thing what I mentioned. Something works and some things I don't want to change, which is, for example, the handle. My handles have those very basic design elements, function elements, and I don't want to change it, you know, beyond some point. So they're gonna stay that way. So you change other things, but in the end of it, it makes completely different model, completely different knife. So reality is most of my designs were born by reshaping the previous design or the previous or combination of blades and handles and stuff like that. Do you prefer to use liner locks or frame locks? Why? A funny question, because even though I make tremendous percentage of my knives are frame locks, I do prefer liner locks. Because it goes back to what the pocket knife is. Pocket knife is a pocket knife. There is no need for overbuilt crazy thickness frame locks, etc., etc. Liner locks they are more comfortable because you have two solid scales on both sides, so you don't have this lock cut out on the lock side. You have a scale there. They are usually lighter. They are usually, when it comes to production knives, they are usually easier for the production companies to make because they have less titanium to work with or less steel to work with if it's steel liner. And they are lighter, and I just like them better. They are often, the action is sometimes a little nicer on them because you're not pressing on the lock bar sometimes with the, from the bottom of the handle with your index finger, middle finger. Another thing is, some people think that the frame lock is stronger just because, the log is so much thicker. Not true actually at all, because the knife is only as strong as the weakest point, and the weakest point, assuming that you get the lock right, your weakest point is your lock bar relief here, and that's essentially the same on a frame lock or a liner lock. So it really makes no difference how strong the knife is. It's gonna be more or less the same. How did you end up in the United States? I had the opportunity to come up, it's probably 12-13 years now, to come here. My wife has a father here, so when that came out, I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to go somewhere out of Slovakia, and when the opportunity came up, I jumped on it. I went to check it out, and I can't lie, I fell in love with it. It's a land of opportunities, and I like it. Freedoms and opportunities, it's the one thing that there's few places in the world, I think, that can match what America has to offer. If you want, if you're willing to work for it, it's a nice place. I like it here. I like people, you have bad people everywhere, you have good people everywhere. I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of good people, and I love it. It's our home now. Hey, so here's the last part, the section other. Why do you name your knives after sharks? There was a prototype I made. It was, before Mako was a Mako, it was just a prototype of a knife. I did like a 1-0 with Damascus, and the customer that won it in auction, he emailed me, talking about how it reminds me of a Mako shark. And I just instantly kind of fell in love with it. I really liked it, and I called that model a Mako. And for some reason, ever since then, I went with the sharks' names. It was shortly after we moved to Florida. I love the ocean and the nature here, and going snorkeling, and I love sharks. I think they're amazing animals. And even before that, all my knife models, the fixed blades, were called after animals. You know, I had the T-Rexes, raptors, dinosaurs, couple different ones. They're all animals essentially, and fish. I had some fish stuff too. So I kind of stuck with the sharks for the folders. Makes sense, you know. It just, you know, you see it on a lot of makers. They kind of have the theme of the names, because on the end of it, the name doesn't really mean much. It doesn't have to represent something, but it's clever marketing thing when you keep it in a theme. So that's why I went with the sharks. And yes, I swam with the shark. It was just a nurse, but I did swim with the shark. We love it here. What are the 5 most important tools for making a folding knife? Grinder, grinder, and grinder, and drill press. Now it's to be serious, you can make a decent knife even without 5 tools actually. Grinder is number 1. You have to have a grinder, decent grinder. I highly recommend the flipping ones when you can flip it horizontally or vertically. Simple mill. So like the mill you see there, I think you see it in the shot there. That's a Grizzly 0704 $1,100 mill, 1000, I think 11 or 12. Or even the smaller one, Grizzly 0758 I have. I really like that one. That's only like $800 mill. So that mill will serve you as a drill press and as a mill, which is pretty much all you need if you want to just make, you know, one knife at a time, and doesn't matter how long it will take. If you want to be time efficient, like I try to be, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drills and 2 mills, and I still think I would take 2 more of those micro drill presses I have. Drill, grinder, mill, drill, bandsaw. I like these basic Harbor Freight bandsaws, because out of all the Harbor Freights, you know how they are, you know, they are crappy tools. Their bandsaws are actually half decent. The first 2 I had lasted me years. I don't use them that much, but I've used them enough to, you know, cut enough titanium and steel and everything. They are not bad for the money you pay for them compared to, you know, the DeWalt or Milwaukee equivalents, or, you know, alternatives. So I highly recommend it. I actually have it just with the clamps clamped down to the table, and using the little tiny table I made for it to use as a, you know, like a tool rest, or, you know, the cutting table. So that's grinder, mill, drill, bandsaw. At this point I couldn't imagine my life without a sandblaster, stone wash, and the little router setups I have. You can see it on the videos. I have a little regular woodworking router, but I have it set up in the base, and I have a carbide burr bits there, and I do a lot of cleaning and the texturing with those. Hopefully I didn't miss something up. There's too many tools, but the most important ones are the grinder, drill press, or mill. You know, mill will serve you as both. Those are the 2 most important. What inspired you to support the left-handed community? There have been so few left-hand frame locks knives that are priced within the casual EDC range. This knife represents a huge value. Thank you. It wasn't really inspiration. To me it was a no-brainer, like, to have a left-handed, because honestly at this point I thought that more production knives are available in left-handed configuration. So I'm surprised that people really think it's a big deal. I'm really surprised that these big companies, you know, I'm talking about companies that make thousands and tens of thousands knives, don't have left-handed version of pretty much everything they make, because at those numbers it really is no difference to make a left-handed right-handed knife. So I'm kind of surprised. So it was, you know, kind of just logical thing to offer left-handed also. I'm kind of hoping that the knife will sell well, and that means also offer it for the left-handed people. You know, it's 10% of population are left-handed people, so essentially you can boost your sales by 10% by offering left-handed, if you have a manufacturer that is willing to work within, you know, certain prices at a certain numbers, because these numbers are still kind of low if you compare it to the real production companies. You know, hundreds or even couple thousand knives still doesn't compare to the big production companies. So yeah, it's production knife, but it's still really small scale production knife compared to what most people consider when you say production knife. Allowed only 2 of your knives. Would you rather fight 1 horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? And which of your knives would you choose for this task? Excalibur. It doesn't matter if it's a duck-sized horse or a horse-sized duck. Excalibur. I'll take Excalibur against everything. I don't have one myself. I actually kept the smaller, it's not smaller, it's just an arrow, where I have a wakizashi blade that I made with Kylie, CKC knives, you know, many years back. And I have that one because it's just much lighter and nimbler in the hand, but it's still a beast of a chopper. And here for Florida, it's more like a machete, which is more, you know, it's better for this environment here than the Excalibur is, because Excalibur is a beast. Excalibur is a big knife. So Excalibur, it's just one. I don't even need the second choice. It'll be Excalibur because that thing can handle anything. Is there a knife design or an idea you have that you would really like to make but you won't because you think it wouldn't sell well or wouldn't fit in with your other knives? There is a knife design that I want to make sometimes, but I'm not making it not because of the reasons you ask. It is because I don't have, you know, if I have an idea I make it, so it doesn't really happen that I would not make something just because of what you described. But there is a knife design that I would love to make sometimes, but just a couple times I tried to design it, I was just hitting walls in mechanics. The main reason because I never did anything like that, and I never played with knives like that. I don't even like knives like that, but I want to make a knife like that. It's a balisong. I would love to design and make a balisong one day. And but not like, you know, to me balisongs are hard because they all look the same, you know, quote unquote same. They're very restrictive by default, by how they work. What I want to do is I hate balisongs. I don't like balisongs, but one of my grail knives, it's probably the #1 grail knife for me, is Bradley balisong, like his custom, one of his customs, because his balisongs look like regular good old EDC knives. But it's a balisong, which essentially is the strongest knife. So my dream is sometimes to design, you know, I don't want to make it sound like I want to design how he designs it, but something like what he does. Have a balisong knife that looks like my knife. You know, I would do something that looks like my knife, but it would be a balisong version of it. Like, that's kind of my dream. I think I would want to make it happen one day. It's really hard if you never dealt with it. I've never even like had the balisong really. I had the Benchmade with the Bradley design with the G10 handles many years ago, but it's so much different than frame lock or liner lock that it's kind of not intimidating, but it's tricky, it's hard, and I already spent hours and I didn't make the design work to do, you know, with the design elements I wanted to have. I couldn't make it work, so it will take time, but I'll get it done sometimes. I think you mentioned the final edge angle is 20 degrees. Yeah, 20 DPS. So that's kind of what you're gonna see, 20 DPS on most of the production knives and just general knives. You know, a lot of knives have 20 DPS edges. Is this what you recommend for everyday use for this knife? Or can you take the S35VN to a finer edge? What angle do you put on your custom knives? I try about 15 DPS on my knives. Most of the steels can take 15 DPS, and a lot depends also how thick it is behind the edge. Those are two things that play a role. The angle of the edge, but also how thick the grind is behind the edge. So there are steels that can, you know, pretty much anything can take that angle if it's thick enough behind the edge. But if you want to take it really thin and have, you know, 20 thousandths or less behind the apex, now you have to consider what you're using, because some high carbide steels 20,000 is still pretty, you know, that's pretty strong. But if you would take it down to 10,000, now you're risking with some high carbide edges that you can have some chipping there. But to answer, yeah, I recommend it. 20. There's nothing wrong with 20 degrees, especially if it's not big thick edge, and this certainly isn't. This is a nice lean grind, nice slicer. So 20 DPS is pretty nice, and I use 15 DPS on my customs. Or I try to. It's all eyeball, but I try to be around 15 DPS. What hardware do you prefer, titanium or stainless? Why? Aesthetic, titanium, of course, because I can analyze it and have some fun with it. Function-wise, stainless. It's much stronger. There is no question about it. Steel is stronger than titanium. I've strip snap a lot of titanium screws in the process of making, just like brand new screws. I pretty much never strip, not strip. I don't strip screws because I use pretty good drivers and new screws. But you snap the head off. So where your thread starts underneath the head, often that's like the weakest point of the screw. I've snapped a bunch of titanium and high quality titanium screws, and pretty much never snapped steel screw. How can someone get their hands on a custom knife from you? So I recently closed my Gear Bastion's website. It was not inefficient. It's a lot of money that I paid for it, and it was unnecessary. I wasn't selling that many. I wasn't planning on having stock of like a mid-techs or other things. So at this point, it's really just when I make a knife, I put it on sale, and I could save decent money on just listing it on the Instagram. So, and a lot of people actually were excited about it, that they don't have to deal with some other website. They just say I'll take it when I put it on sale on Instagram, and hit me up on email. So when I have a knife for sale, I make a listing on Instagram, with all the details and saying this knife is for sale, all the details. First I'll take it gets it. So if you want it, you just say I'll take it, and shoot me an email. I occasionally send some stuff to some dealers like Knife Center, Arizona Custom Knives, Blade HQ. So those are other places. And other dealers, if they have some stuff, it's most likely used stuff. Even these dealers sometimes they do the commission things. So, but I directly only sold, I think, to those 3 dealers: the Arizona, Blade HQ, and Knife Centers. It's a very small percentage actually. It always was. I always like the idea of me selling directly to my customers much better than going to the dealers. But at the same time, it is kind of marketing step, to get the knives out to these big dealers, because they have a lot more people going through their website and their social media accounts than I have. So it's a smart thing to do every once in a while. Why do you think people gravitate towards your knives more than others? Well, I don't think people gravitate more to my knives than others. That's just, I can't make that. I don't think I can make that. I can think that it's just, my knives are not that sought after because they are not as sought after as some other knife makers, because I try to be accessible. I try to not make my knives out of unobtainium. There are a lot of knife makers that you can never get their knives unless you're a friend or a friend of a friend or an auction piece or stuff like that. I always like the idea that, hey, you want a knife from me, you have a chance to buy regular first come first serve pretty much a couple times a week. I always like that idea, and I always try to do it that way. But I don't know, I think the reality of the custom knife world is people don't just buy knives, they don't just collect knives, and they don't just buy the knives because they like the knives, but they also like the makers. So I don't know, I like to think that people like me. I think I'm an honest guy, and I try to work hard, I try to satisfy everybody, even though you never can satisfy everybody, but and don't get ego get ahead of you. That's the number one advice to a lot of new makers. Don't get the ego get the better of you. I think that's the one thing that I'm very grateful for quote unquote growing up on YouTube, growing up in the sense of social media presence, because YouTube is full of all kinds of people, And that will, if it teaches you one thing over the years, with a lot of people, a lot of subscribers, and a lot of people going through, it's always better, just unless it's something really ridiculous, just shut up, swallow your pride, and forget about it. Don't get into the pointless arguments and fights and stuff like that. So I try to do that. Might be kind of out of this. I'm getting away from the original question, but hey, that's what I always did on the YouTube videos too. Hey guys, again, thank you so much for everything. I believe that you're gonna like the knives. I think they're amazing. They're good knives. I think it's a halfway decent design and superb execution from the Wii and from the Massdrop. So I really hope you're gonna like them. I hope you're gonna spread the word if they're gonna be more in stock. So I know I like it. I'm super happy with it. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and I really said it with all humble as I can. I think it's a nice knife and good knife. Functional knife. So I hope you guys are gonna think the same. Thank you again. Take care, stay safe, and remember, don't cut yourself. Oh, you thought it was it, huh? Yeah, you can't get rid of me that easy. I have to go back to the last question because I think my answer was just ridiculous. Why do you think people gravitate towards your knives more than others? Well, I don't think people gravitate more to my knives than other knives. It's relative. I mean, there are makers that are far more sought after than I am. But I think the reason people like my knives, at least I want to believe the reason why people like my knives, is because I try a lot of different things. I don't do complicated things, so yeah, I miss out on that, like the complicated. Don't like the bolsters, but when it comes to the finishes, I try a lot of different things. So I will do a lot of clean stuff, just clean, conceal carry. I do a lot of milling, but I also do a lot of the kind of like a carving textures. And because doing all kinds of things, I'm gonna do something that some people will absolutely love, but there's gonna be a lot of people that will hate it. And I will do something else that is like the opposite. And I think by doing that, you kind of get a little bit of everybody. You try to satisfy everybody, but not with every knife. So I will try to satisfy those people with that design or that knife, and those people with that, and having fun by doing that and trying new things, trying new colors. Same with the colors. I personally love colors, but I know that a lot of people hate colors. Like green is one of my favorite colors. Green is one of the most love-hated colors. There's people that absolutely love it, people that absolutely hate it. But by me doing that, I'm not losing the people that that hate the green, because guess what? I do also knives that are not green, but I also do the knives that are green. If you look through the knife makers, other knife makers, there's not many makers that do green. And so I think it's a smart thing to, even though it's impossible, you try to satisfy everybody, but not with the one knife. You try to satisfy everybody with all your knives. So, one knife for those people, another knife for those people, and all that, and have fun with it. Experiment. I don't like everything I make. There are knives that when I'm done, like, yeah, I'm not crazy about it, but there are people who like it. And that's the one thing what some people don't realize, that yeah, you can hate it, but there are people who like it. And if it's just aesthetics, it's not the function, there is nothing wrong with it. People like different things. People have different tastes. People have different opinions. And it's all subjective, really. If you think that only way to make a knife nice and clean and pristine is the only right way, that's wrong. That's not the only right way. People like different things. So I think a lot of people appreciate that I do a lot of different things. I don't just stick with one clean thing, or I don't just stick with one, rock finish or card finish. I try to do it all, the milling and all that stuff. So I think that's how I achieve that a lot of people are interested, because I do something at least once in a while that satisfies everybody, crisscrossing. You know what I mean. I think that's it. I think that's what I wanted to do, and I think I talk more than enough. Guys, thank you. Take care, stay safe, and remember, don't cut yourself.